A while back, Jordan Peterson posted a little 6-minute video clip that garnered a huge response from viewers. It was called The Curse of Creativity. In the video, he talks about how, although we often glamorize creativity as this wonderful, enjoyable thing, for a creative person, the situation is a little bit more complicated. While the creativity is enjoyable and wonderful in a lot of respects, it is also very complicated because a creative person often has not just a desire to create, but a need to do it. If a creative person just so happens to have a receptive audience for their creative works, an audience that's willing to pay them money so that they can make a living doing what they love, then a creative person is in the perfect situation. But the reality for most creative people is the stuff that they particularly want to make is not necessarily the stuff that anybody else in the entire world cares about. Therefore, while a creative person can make almost anything, they can't always make a living. As a creative person, I can relate to this idea on a very deep level. If I go any stretch of time where I'm not making something, a certain part of me just starts withering. I need that constant rejuvenating life of making something to even feel normal, much less to feel super normal. But I've also experienced this. A lot of times the thing that I have created is not necessarily interesting to anybody else out there. I can pour months and months of effort into creating the best possible expression of something deeply inside me, and when I put it out there, sometimes there's absolutely no reception at all. I think many creative people have this dream that if they just make something wonderful, then it'll all work out financially. Some avenue will open up where they'll be able to keep doing this wonderful thing, and some patron somewhere will help them. Some audience will support them in making this beautiful thing. It's a wonderful gift that happens to a small percentage of creative people. But for the vast majority, they find themselves in a position where they need to find some way to make money that isn't necessarily very connected to the thing that makes them feel alive. Have you ever felt just resentful at the way the world is? Like, it could have been so much better than it was. I think creative people have this amazing capacity to invent. And one of the things that we invent is an idealistic picture of the world. We're good at coming up with ideas. We're also good at imagining a world that is much better than the world that we actually live in. It seems a little unfair that the earth would bless a creative person with this enormous scope for seeing the beauty of the world. The creative person is full of a desire to reflect the beauty of the world, to praise how wonderful the world is. But then, after the moment of creation, it seems sometimes like the world is unwilling to throw the creative person a bone. Why can't the world make it easier for us to show people how beautiful the world is? Why can't we find a way to keep doing the thing that we love doing? Why is it so hard? It's almost like feeling unrequited love. You fall so deeply in love with the world, but then it seems like the world doesn't love you back. This sense of inconvenience and obstacles reminds me of the most famous myth about curses, the curse of the Garden of Eden. In the story, a snake convinces Adam and Eve that if you eat the fruit of this tree that God said you're not supposed to eat, then you will become like God. Now, what's like the defining feature of who God is? God's a creator, right? So in a sense, maybe eating this apple is descriptive of humanity getting this amazing divine gift of creativity. But then what immediately happens after humans get creativity? God comes down and says, okay, well, now that you have this divine thing, now that you're like me, everything's going to be a pain in the butt. Everything's going to be inconvenient. You're going to have to work hard, go through pain and argument and suffering, and nothing's going to come easy. It kind of sounds like the picture of a creative person trying to find a way to make a living. It's like you've got all these intentions, these amazing ideals and desires, but for some reason it's so hard for those to take hold and bear fruit into something that can make a living. Even the next story in the Bible, the story of Cain and Abel, to me seems related to creativity. So both of them are sharing of their output before God, their creation, their creativity, and God accepts Abel's offering of animals, but Cain's offering of vegetables he rejects. And Cain's response is resentment. It's that same feeling of kind of getting the cold shoulder from the world, or a cold shoulder from the person you love. It's like, what's wrong with me? I had this amazing thing that I poured all of my efforts into, and now I don't get a suitable reward for it. This sucks. And it's true. It does suck. I feel as a creative person that it should be much, much easier to make a living, because we need creative people in the world. Creativity is the source of everything that we have. Every single innovation that we enjoy has come about because of some creative person doing this same slog that I'm talking about. It often didn't come easy. It often came with a lot of heartbreak, a lot of yearning, but through effort, thankfully they continued, and we get to enjoy those innovations that creative people put forward. So yeah, without a doubt, creative people have it hard. The more you're consumed with this idea of needing to get this beautiful thing out of you, the more you're going to face a sense of inconvenience, obstacles, and difficulty. But it's funny, even though we talk about it as being a curse, I think it's a little overstated to call it a curse, because if you ask most creative people, would you get rid of your creativity? They would say no, right? They would say something along the lines of, even though it's a pain and it has made my life much more difficult compared to other people, the beauty and enjoyment that I've gotten from it, the miracle of me having this kind of divine sight, outweighs all of the troubles. It's the same thing as like a married couple. Someone who's been married for a very long time has gone through a lot of emotional turmoil trying to live with somebody else, but they've both put in a lot of work to build something together. Most of those married couples would say, I wouldn't take it back if I could go back, even though a lot of times it's maybe been a total pain in the butt. They say the reward of having built something and experiencing a greater scope of beauty because of being with this person, that outweighs the inconvenience, pain, and annoyances of this life. So it's kind of poetic to call creativity a curse, but in real life, it's not exactly a curse. It's like a curse and a blessing. It's a mixed bag, right? If you have a curse, you just want to get rid of it. But that's not the situation for most creative people, I think. Most of them just wish that it was less frustrating. And I think that outlines the true curse. It's poetic to say that creativity is a curse, but really, frustration is a curse. Being in situations where you're frustrated, where stuff is difficult, where nothing comes easy, that's the real curse, not the creativity. It's the inconvenience. I don't know if this sounds like I'm reading into this too much, but I have a very specific reason for this point that I'm making, and that's that viewing a curse as frustration rather than as your creative situation opens up an avenue for you maybe to experience a life that has less of that difficulty and frustration in it. Here's what I mean. I'll give a personal example to explain what I'm getting at here. I am a dad, and I love being a dad. But one of the things that parenting has brought into my life is far more obligations on my time and energy than I've ever had before in my life. To me, that is a very frustrating thing. There's so many things that I want to do with my life. I'm not only a creative person, but a very driven person. So all of a sudden, to feel like my efforts, my momentum is constantly being cut short by another person needing me, needing my time and energy, that is a difficult thing to come to terms with. It's frustrating, just like not being able to create is frustrating. But it's interesting because I talk about parenting being a frustrating thing that I nevertheless love that I get to do. But some people have a different take on parenting. Some people genuinely just love being moms or dads. And I'm not saying I don't love being a mom or dad, but some people love being moms or dads. You know what I'm saying? Like the people that have like 7 kids, they like it. There's something about parenting that they're like, oh yeah, that is my thing. And for me personally, like I haven't felt that way specifically of like parenting. Oh yeah, that is my thing. Get rid of my painting, get rid of my writing time. Like I want to be a dad all the time. That's just not me. So I experience a type of frustration that is probably higher in intensity than somebody who views parenting from a different perspective of like, oh man, this is like what I was meant to do. Now, I'm not saying it's like an easy thing to change your perspective of something that looks frustrating to you. Like if I'm sitting in traffic, it's going to be hard to not be frustrated by that. Traffic in some senses is kind of frustrating, but there are ways that I think you can relate to things that give you frustration. And one of those is to change the way that you engage with the actual process of the thing. So for example, with my kid, what would it look like for me to change the process of parenting with my kid to maybe make it a little less frustrating? Well, one of the things that I could do is like come up with games to play with my child that like I also enjoy. That would make things better, right? All of a sudden, just that simple change in practice transforms that hour of parenting into something that maybe initially was frustrating, but now is less frustrating. It's like the same thing. I'm spending time with my kid, but the different process makes it hit different. There's a practical thing you can do with creativity as well that can give you ample space between the creativity and your frustrations. And that's when you're creating to focus on the process of creating rather than the product of creating. It turns out that a lot of our frustrations related to creativity are kind of packed in at the tail end of the creative act. It's like, will this creation sell? Will this creation get a good reception? Well, I think it's good. Will it have been worth my time? A lot of the frustrations don't necessarily have to do with what's actually going on when you're creating, but like what you hope the outcome of the creating is going to be. We pack a lot of our analysis and intentions and thoughts on the object of our creating at the end, rather than the actual creation. But then all of that thinking and analysis pollutes the creative act. While you're making, you're analyzing and saying, oh, this is bad. Oh, I'm wasting my time. Which means that something that theoretically you've said you love to do, to create, becomes this kind of burdensome and unenjoyable process because it's full of your own analysis of why it's bad, why it should be better, why it's frustrating. Have you ever heard of the book The War of Art by Steven Pressfield? That book is all about frustration. He uses different language for it. He talks about it in terms of resistance, but he says that is the greatest enemy to art: resistance. And to him, resistance is your thoughts and your analysis about what's going on. No analysis, no problem. No thoughts, no resistance. He takes this almost craftsman-like approach to art. Rather than viewing art in idealistic terms, he says, well, I'm a writer, so I'm going to sit and write, because writing is what a writer does. The writerness is in the writing. Being a writer is not about thinking about being a writer. It's not about having many books published. Being a writer is literally being someone who practices writing. So practice. Just practice. The beauty of this craftsman-like approach is it's cultivating this love and adoration of making this thing. It doesn't matter so much what happens afterwards, because you're directing all of your joy into the process of making this thing. And a funny thing happens with this. It turns out that the more you pay attention to your craft, the better you get at it. And the more you pay attention to your craft, the better your final products turn out, even without the worrying, without the analysis. In fact, because you're worrying and analyzing less, you're devoting more of your care to making something beautiful. And so the artwork that you create ends up far better than it would have been if you had been spending most of your energy wanting things to be better, or worrying that they wouldn't be better, or criticizing your work while you're in the process of making it. Artists are the most creative people in the world, but one of the things we don't realize about thoughts is, in a way, they're kind of artwork too. Thoughts start as these like little seeds of an idea, and they get nurtured by the attention that you feed into them. This means that nobody can worry like an artist can. Nobody can imagine all the bad scenarios that could happen than an artist, because they have the greatest talent for imagination out of anybody out there in the world. This means that if you can somehow develop a new disciplined relationship to your own thoughts, then suddenly you can find way more energy to create beautiful and better works than you previously could. Obviously, changing the way you think is a very difficult thing to do, but that's what I love about Steven Pressfield's perspective. If you focus on the thing that you're actually doing instead of thinking about it, then a lot of the problems just solve themselves. If you like these ideas I'm sharing, I've got a free gift for you. I've written an entire ebook about this subject right here. It's called The Art Garden, and in it I share a dead simple strategy for being able to create more easily, without frustration. The link is down in the description. Click it to get your copy of The Art Garden. Really, I think what Steven Pressfield is suggesting is that you no longer identify as a creative person so much. It's like, rather than all of this identifying while you're doing the work and after you're doing the work, just do the work without the identifying. Perhaps if you give your attention to the process instead of the outcome, you'll feel less tortured by the whole business. You'll become less of a tortured artist. There's another trope of a tortured person out there besides the tortured artist. It's the tortured lover, right? It's someone who is so infatuated by somebody, they just can't stop thinking about them. They obsess over them. They fixate on this person. They want to know what their favorite food is. They want to know how they spend the day. They know all kinds of creepy facts about them. And the tortured lover puts themselves in a real predicament. By their fixation and obsession, they put themselves in just the right spot to ensure they will never get the thing that they want, to be in a relationship with that person. It's funny because maybe they would have had a fighting chance if they could just back off and chill out a little bit. But because they care about this person too much, because they're too engaged, they have scuttled any chance of getting the thing that they want. I think similarly, tortured artists are too interested in their creativity. They care too much. Maybe if they cared a little bit less and they just did creating, they might have a much greater chance of success in their creativity. Disinterested sounds like a negative word now, because to us it basically means the same thing as uninterested. But previously, disinterested actually meant impartial. It meant that you weren't so emotionally extricated in the whole drama that you couldn't give a good judgment of what's really going on and the right thing to do. Disinterested was this positive trait of being able to stand back from the thing. You weren't entangled. As creative people, I think a lot of our trouble comes from the fact that we're too entangled with the identity of being a creative person. If we recognize that creativity was just a thing that we did and not who we were, then our creativity might actually go off better with less frustration. Writers have a common bit of advice that they give related to this disinterest thing. They say you should kill your darlings, which sounds very gruesome, but basically all it means is if you have a wonderful piece of writing that just doesn't fit with your overall goal, your wider vision for the book, then you should get rid of it so that the wider book is better. You don't want to sacrifice the greater good of a beautiful piece of art because you can't let go of this little chunk of writing that really doesn't belong. That's impartiality. That's saying, I got to get rid of this, even if I love it, because I want to make good work. If you're unable to kill your darlings in your work, you're inevitably going to have this very low glass ceiling on your potential. It's because your work can't really be good unless you get rid of the bad stuff. And the bad stuff might be beautiful, but it might not be the right piece of art for your greater purposes. Having this wider scope and being able to look at your work externally, like an editor might, who has no stakes in the work and just wants to make something good, that's the way to create the best possible work you can. Once your work is out there on the page or on the canvas, it can't be precious anymore. Now it's something that you work with to make as good as possible. So, is creativity a curse? Sometimes. Is it a blessing? Sometimes. Just like everything real in life, it can't be broken down into good or bad. It all depends on the situation. Creative people have a more complicated relationship with life than other people. They have to at once balance this strong yearning in their heart for self-expression with the practicalities that their brain is suggesting. They need to find that slice in the Venn diagram where the brain and the heart can both create something that's satisfactory. It's like having a relationship between your brain and your heart. And just like all relationships, they're difficult. They involve lots of compromises, but when you work at finding a way, you can create something that is more beautiful than you could have had otherwise. Creative people probably have a greater scope for joy and wonder than the average person, because this divine gift of creativity that all people have is amped up to 11 in a creative person. It's difficult work, but just like in a marriage, I think the best outcomes come when you put your head down and you do the work. You try to make something good rather than spending all of your time analyzing how it could be better. Thanks for watching. Again, if you like this stuff, you'll want to get the Art Garden. It's like exactly about this topic. You can find the link down on the downloads, click it, and you'll get your copy. Have a great day, guys.